A struggling woman mistook a wealthy CEO for a fraudster, and what happened next left everyone stunned. But before we dive into the story, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? Isabella Torres had just stepped out of a small cafe in the bustling downtown area. It was her final interview of the day, and just like the three before it, it ended with nothing but a polite, "We'll get back to you," and an inspirational pamphlet about perseverance. Her heart weighed heavy as she walked along the crowded sidewalk, her shoulder bag hanging off one shoulder. The weight of her failed attempts dragged her down, tears threatening to spill. This was a great idea, she muttered bitterly to herself. Coming to the city to find a job, next step, selling trinkets on the corner. As she neared the subway entrance, something caught her eye. An elderly woman, probably in her late 60s, struggled with a heavy duffel bag, clearly overwhelmed. A man in a sharp suit and dark sunglasses approached from behind, and Isabella's instincts immediately screamed that something wasn't right. Without thinking, she rushed forward, shouting, "Hey, leave her alone, you creep," and swung her purse at him. The man, caught off guard, stumbled back. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he yelled, clutching his side. "Let go of her, you thief!" Isabella shouted. But the elderly lady, now standing upright, shook her head in confusion. "He's just helping me." The man removed his sunglasses, revealing a calm expression. "Are you serious?" he asked. "I'm Brian Phillips, CEO of Phillips Enterprises. I was simply offering assistance." Isabella took the business card from Brian slowly, still unsure about the whole situation. It wasn't that she didn't trust him, but after a series of failed interviews and a lifetime of trusting the wrong people, she wasn't ready to let her guard down. The card in her hand felt far too pristine, almost too fancy to be fake, but the whole encounter still seemed out of place. Brian noticed the hesitation in her eyes. "Look, I know this situation is strange, but you really have nothing to worry about," he said with a small chuckle, rubbing his sore ribs. "I don't normally get hit with purses, but hey, I'll survive." "Aha," Isabella muttered. She looked at his business card again, the words CEO of Phillips Enterprises standing out in gold letters. All right, you may not be a scammer, but I don't exactly go around trusting strangers." Brian laughed softly, a genuine, warm laugh. "Understandable," he said. "But if you don't trust me, that's fine. All I'm asking is that you let me make up for this. How about we get some coffee?" Isabella raised an eyebrow. "You're serious?" "Why not?" he grinned. "At least let me buy you coffee before you decide if I'm worthy of your trust." Against her better judgment, Isabella agreed. She followed him into a nearby cafe, still trying to process what had just happened. Brian was dressed in a sharp suit, his appearance far too clean-cut for someone who had just been falsely accused of robbery. She still couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than met the eye. They sat down, and after a few minutes of awkward silence, Brian finally spoke up. "I don't blame you for your reaction. Honestly, it's kind of refreshing. Most people wouldn't have done anything. But you acted quickly, and I admire that." Isabella let out a sigh, the weight of the situation starting to settle in. "I thought you were a scam artist. It's kind of embarrassing now, but you can't blame me for thinking that." Brian leaned back in his chair, eyes glimmering with amusement. "Honestly, I don't blame you either. You've got good instincts. I've had my share of bad experiences with people assuming the worst about me." Isabella couldn't help but feel a little more relaxed. She looked at him, trying to gauge whether he was really as genuine as he seemed. "All right, I'll admit, you seem like you're not exactly a criminal mastermind." Brian smiled. "I'm glad we're getting somewhere. Look, I really could use an assistant for a project I'm working on. It's temporary, but I think you'd be a great fit. And I promise, no more bag swinging." Isabella hesitated. "A job offer? From the guy I just attacked?" "Yep," he grinned. "You're quick on your feet, and honestly, I could use someone with your instincts." Isabella sat back, thinking it over. Her life hadn't exactly been going the way she hoped, but could this be the break she needed? She hadn't even planned on being in the city today, let alone meeting a CEO who was offering her a job on a whim. "All right," she finally said. "I'll think about it. But I'm not making any promises." "Fair enough," Brian replied, writing his phone number on a napkin and sliding it across the table. "Call me when you're ready. I'd love to have you on board. Just, no more hitting me with your bag." Isabella laughed, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something other than frustration. Maybe, just maybe, this was the change she needed. The next morning, Isabella found herself on a quiet street in the city, holding her phone in one hand, staring at Brian's number written on a napkin, and wondering if she should call. Her mind was a storm of doubts. Could she really accept a job with someone she had just met? Was this some kind of trap? But deep down, something about the offer seemed genuine, and part of her was tired of waiting for the world to offer her opportunities that never came. By noon, she had decided. She would call him. "Hello." Brian's voice answered, smooth and calm, just like she remembered. "Hi, it's Isabella. I've been thinking about your offer. I'd like to hear more details about the project." "Glad to hear it," Brian said without missing a beat. "Meet me for lunch. We can talk about it." Isabella agreed, and within an hour, she was sitting across from him in a small, upscale restaurant, the city noise barely audible outside. Brian looked the same as yesterday, confident, well-groomed, and ready to tackle whatever came his way. But there was something different today, something softer in his gaze, as though he wasn't just offering her a job, but a chance at something more. "So," Isabella started, her voice a little hesitant. "Tell me about this project. What exactly would I be doing?" Brian leaned forward slightly, his fingers tapping against his water glass. "It's a humanitarian project, but it's more than just building structures or sending aid. It's about creating something sustainable, something that will last. We're starting by building a school and medical center in a rural village. It's a place where people are desperate for help, but most of the resources are scattered, and there's no one to connect the dots." Isabella listened intently, but her mind was still clouded with doubt. "And you want me to be a part of that? With no experience in this kind of work?" "Exactly," Brian said, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I need someone who doesn't have the usual corporate mindset. Someone who can connect with people, who knows what it's like to struggle. You've got that in spades." Isabella blinked, surprised by his blunt honesty. She had never considered herself someone who was particularly special or unique, just a woman who had been dealt a tough hand in life. But somehow, Brian saw something in her that she had never noticed before. "So, what's the catch?" she asked, leaning back in her chair. Brian raised an eyebrow. "Catch? There's no catch. This is real work, with real people. It won't be easy, and you might not even get the credit you deserve. But if you do this, you'll be part of something bigger than yourself." His words struck a chord deep inside her. She had always wanted to make a difference, but it seemed like every job she had tried fell short, leaving her feeling like a small, insignificant piece in a much larger puzzle. Isabella felt her guard slipping away. "You really think I can do this? You don't even know me." Brian smiled, his expression kind and genuine. "I think you're exactly who I need." There it was. The opportunity. The chance to do something real, something that mattered. For the first time in what felt like forever, Isabella felt a flicker of hope. She looked at him, uncertainty still in her heart but hope starting to push out the doubt. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll be your assistant. For the project." "That's what I like to hear," Brian said, his voice warm. "It's going to be a challenge, but it's going to be worth it. Welcome aboard, Isabella." Isabella took a deep breath. She had made her choice. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, it felt like she was finally heading in the right direction. No more waiting for life to happen. She was going to make it happen herself. The following day, Isabella found herself sitting on a train headed toward a small village that she had never heard of before, her heart a mix of excitement and anxiety. Brian had arranged everything, flights, accommodations, and the details of the project. She had a one-way ticket, a temporary job offer, and a sense of purpose that had been missing from her life for a long time. As the train rumbled through the countryside, Isabella looked out the window, watching the sprawling fields and small towns pass by. The further she traveled, the more isolated the world around her seemed. This village wasn't just a remote location, it felt like a world that was entirely separate from her city life. And as the train approached the final stop, she felt a wave of uncertainty. What was she really getting into? Was she ready for this? At the station, Brian was waiting for her, standing next to a rugged, dusty SUV. He waved as soon as he saw her, and for the first time, Isabella noticed that there was a warmth in his eyes, not the cool professionalism she had first encountered. "Welcome to the real world," he said, offering a reassuring smile. "You'll find that life is much simpler here." Isabella stepped off the train and breathed in the fresh air. It smelled different from the city, cleaner, with a hint of earth and greenery. "I wasn't expecting a welcome party," she teased, her nerves starting to settle. "Well, this is about as close to a party as we're going to get," Brian joked, opening the door to the SUV. "Hop in. We've got a little ways to go." As they drove through winding dirt roads, Brian explained more about the project. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us. We'll be building a school, a medical center, and we'll need to bring in supplies. But more than that, we need to build trust with the community. They've seen a lot of people come and go, but we're different. I promise you that." Isabella looked at him, studying his face, trying to gauge if he was just another person trying to make himself look good. But there was something in his tone, something honest and earnest. She could tell he meant what he said. "How long have you been doing this kind of work?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. "Not long enough," Brian replied, his expression becoming more serious. "I've been with the company for years, but I'm new to this. The difference now is that I'm doing something that actually matters. I'm not just sitting in an office. I'm out here, with people who need help, and I can't walk away. Not anymore." Isabella nodded. She could see that this was more than just a job to him. This was his mission. His life's work. When they arrived at the village, Isabella was struck by how different it was. The houses were small but colorful, surrounded by lush fields and mountains in the distance. Children ran around, playing and laughing, their energy infectious. The community had a warmth to it that Isabella hadn't expected. Brian showed her the small house she would be staying in. It was basic but cozy, with a small garden in the back and a view of the valley. "This is where you'll be staying for the next few weeks," he said, his voice softer than usual. "We're going to need all the hands we can get, so I hope you're ready." Isabella stepped inside and set her bag down. She looked around the small space, taking in the simplicity and quiet beauty of the place. "I didn't expect this," she said quietly. "None of us did," Brian replied. "But sometimes, the best things come from the unexpected." As the sun set over the village, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Isabella felt a sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The first few days in the village were filled with hard work and even harder realizations. Isabella had expected the project to be simple: build a few structures, do a bit of organizing, and get everything ready for the community. But as she worked alongside the villagers and Brian, she realized how little she actually knew about real, grassroots change. The first task was to meet with the local leaders. Brian took her to a small meeting in the village square, where they were welcomed by a group of elderly men and women, who seemed both wary and curious about the outsiders in their midst. "You're not just here to build, are you?" one of the men asked, his eyes piercing through Isabella. "You want to help us, but it's more than just a building, isn't it?" Isabella froze for a moment, taken aback. She had come here to make a difference, but the way the man spoke made her feel like she had underestimated everything. This wasn't just about buildings or medical centers, it was about understanding the people and their needs, their way of life. Brian stepped forward, sensing her hesitation. "It's more than just construction," he said. "It's about building a future. One that includes everyone. We're here to listen, to learn, and to make sure this project benefits the community in ways that last." The villagers seemed to soften at Brian's words, but Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that she was being tested in a way she hadn't anticipated. She had to earn their trust, and that wasn't something she could do overnight. As the days passed, Isabella began to work more closely with the villagers, helping organize materials, translating when necessary, and even helping to plan the logistics for the medical center. Each task, no matter how small, made her realize how much she was learning about the project, the people, and herself. Brian noticed her growth, and he made sure to acknowledge it. "You've really stepped up these last few days," he said one afternoon, as they stood by the construction site. "I think you're starting to get it. This isn't just about tasks. It's about relationships. Building trust with people. That's the foundation of any project." Isabella smiled, though she was still unsure of her place in this grand scheme. "I'm starting to see that. At first, I thought I was just helping with logistics. But it's more than that, isn't it?" "Much more," Brian replied. "You're not just helping them. You're becoming part of their world. That's how we make real change, when we understand the people we're working with, and they understand us." Isabella had always thought of herself as someone who didn't belong, someone who had to work extra hard to fit in. But here, in this small village with people she barely knew, she began to feel like she was part of something important, something bigger than herself. She realized that maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong about herself all along. She didn't need to be perfect. She didn't need a fancy degree or a prestigious job title. What she needed was the willingness to show up, to listen, and to do her best. Late one evening, as she sat outside her small house, the sound of children playing in the distance, Isabella had a moment of clarity. She wasn't the same person who had boarded that train a few days ago. The doubts, the fear, the feeling of being an outsider, they were slowly starting to fade away. In their place, she felt something stronger, confidence. She was making a difference. She was learning. And she was finally beginning to trust herself. Brian found her sitting outside, gazing at the stars above. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Of course not," Isabella replied, smiling. He sat down beside her, and for a while, they simply stared at the night sky, both feeling the weight of the work ahead of them, but also the hope that came with it. "You know," Isabella said after a long pause, "I didn't expect any of this. Not the village, not the project, not us." Brian smiled, his eyes softening. "Life's full of surprises." "Yeah," she agreed. "And I think I'm finally ready to stop running from them." The days in the village began to blend together, each one filled with small victories and challenges. Isabella had never imagined herself in a place like this, where everything moved at a different pace, but the simplicity and beauty of the surroundings began to feel like home. As the school and medical center slowly took shape, so did her understanding of what it truly meant to help others, not as a distant observer, but as someone who was actively involved in building something lasting. One afternoon, as she worked alongside the villagers, she noticed a small group of children watching them from the sidelines. They were fascinated by the construction process, their eyes wide with curiosity. Isabella smiled and walked over to them, kneeling down to their level. "You want to see something cool?" she asked, her voice playful. The children nodded eagerly. She motioned for them to come closer as she picked up a tool. "This," she said, showing them the hammer, "is for building something strong, something that can help all of you." The children stared at the hammer in awe, but one little boy stepped forward and asked, "What will we build?" "Something that will help you and your friends," Isabella replied. "A place where you can learn and get better. A place where you can dream about your future." The little boy smiled. "I want to be a doctor. Can I use this hammer too?" Isabella chuckled, handing him a small piece of wood. You can use it however you want, but remember, the most important thing you can build is your dream. Brian, who had been watching from a distance, walked over with a grin. You've got the kids captivated, huh? They're not the only ones, Isabella said with a smile. I think I'm starting to get it. All this. It's not just about the buildings. It's about giving these kids a chance to dream. Brian nodded. Exactly. That's what this is all about. Later that evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of purple, Isabella stood on a small hill overlooking the village. The construction site was visible below, with workers still laboring into the twilight. The village, though still far from perfect, was beginning to change, slowly but surely. Isabella took a deep breath, the crisp evening air filling her lungs. She had always been a fighter, but she had spent most of her life fighting alone, unsure of what she was even fighting for. Now, surrounded by people who were working toward a common goal, she felt a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. She wasn't just another resume in a pile. She wasn't just someone waiting for a chance. She was a part of something real. Brian came up beside her, his presence calm and steady. You know, he said softly, I think we've done something good here. You've done something good here. Isabella smiled, her heart swelling with pride. I didn't do it alone. We're all in this together. Brian looked at her, his eyes thoughtful. You've learned a lot in a short time. Not just about the project, but about yourself. Isabella turned to him, her eyes meeting his. I'm still learning, she admitted. But for the first time, I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be. Like this is what I was meant to do. You've come a long way, Brian said. You're not the same person who walked into that cafe a few weeks ago. You've grown. Isabella nodded, her gaze drifting back to the village below. And I think I'm just getting started. As they stood together, watching the stars begin to dot the sky, Isabella felt an overwhelming sense of peace. For the first time in her life, she wasn't chasing something she didn't understand. She was building something with her own two hands, a future, a community, and a purpose. And as she looked at the people around her, working tirelessly to make their dreams a reality, Isabella knew that this was only the beginning of her journey. There was more to build, more to learn, and more to give. But with each passing day, she was becoming exactly the person she was meant to be. After months of hard work, growth, and unexpected turns, Isabella and Brian finally found themselves standing in front of a small group of family, friends, and villagers, exchanging vows in a simple, heartfelt wedding ceremony. It was nothing grand, but everything about it felt right. The dirt roads, the vibrant colors of the village, and the children running around, laughing, all of it symbolized the new chapter of their lives. The two of them, who had met in the most unlikely way, had built something even more incredible than the school or medical center, a life full of love, trust, and shared purpose. Brian, the CEO of a powerful company, and Isabella, once an uncertain job seeker, had each found something they never expected. Their connection wasn't born from smooth beginnings or perfect circumstances. Instead, it emerged from misunderstandings, risks, and unexpected kindness. In a world that often feels chaotic, they discovered that sometimes the best things come from the most unpredictable moments. Love doesn't always follow the typical path. Sometimes, it starts with a misunderstanding, an accidental encounter, or a leap of faith. What truly matters is not the perfection of the beginning but the willingness to grow together. Embrace the unexpected in life, especially in relationships. Even when things seem uncertain, taking risks and trusting in someone can lead to the most meaningful connections. Just like Isabella and Brian, sometimes we find love where we least expect it, through patience, open hearts, and mutual respect. What did you think of Brian and Isabella's story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. On a scale of 0 to 10, how would you rate their journey? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And be sure to check out more heartwarming tales by clicking right here.